Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the week. In this one, we'll be talking about NVIDIA with the special Founders Edition SKUs that don't get LHR. We'll also be going over ATX12VO once again, talk about Intel's GPUs that have been in the news for a couple of years now and are approaching some form of actualization. We'll also be going over the FTC suing an ISP because they lied. That's, wow, never would think an ISP would not tell the truth. That's strange. We're also going to be pouring one out for Internet Explorer because apparently it's not dead yet and now it's dying. Before that, this video is brought to you by Kioxia, said to be the original inventors of NAND flash memory and formerly known as Toshiba memory. Kioxia's XG6 M.2 SSD is a high-end NVMe SSD claiming up to 3180 megabytes per second read and 2960 megabytes per second write speeds sequentially, and it's ideally used in high-performance gaming PCs or power-conscious laptops. The XG6 is available up to 1 terabyte, and the company also has its BG4 SSD in a much smaller M.2 2230 form factor for up to 1 terabyte of ultra-compact storage. Learn more about Kioxia at the links in the description below, including about their enterprise storage products. So the first one's just some plans that we have on the GN side of things. So from a content perspective, we've been trying really hard lately to make sure there's not too much critical stuff back to back because it can be a little bit fatiguing, and we don't want it to look like it's just like we're negative about everything all the time, because it's not true. It's just that right now there's a lot more stuff that it's obvious the correct disposition towards it is criticism. Like look at the Dell computer, for example, and that's sort of a byproduct of the greater market. And not being able to really review video cards in the way we would typically do it, where you look at all the different partner models and things, that's put a damper on some of the coverage that would typically put us in contact with good products. And so to try and balance it, we've had this balancing act of coverage where I'm not sure how, I don't think it's really too visible from the viewer's perspective, which is mostly a good thing because you want it to all look like it's just a cohesive operation in terms of what we're reviewing, what we're covering. But to give you some behind the scenes of what we've been trying to do, we're trying to schedule coverage so that if there's a lot of critical things coming up at once, like right now, we had 2 parts of the Dell review. There's a couple other things in the pipeline I won't tease right now, but they're also very critical. And these products, they're all deserving of the criticism, but it's still fatiguing. And so what I've been trying to do is we mixed in the Fantex P368 review that was really positive. I actually played around with a much more positive titling. We ended up going with a neutral title for the review where it was Fantex P368 review or something like that. But we had briefly an extremely positive title where we called it like Exceptional Airflow or something like that. I was like, no one watched it. So I changed it to a more neutral one. It's been doing okay, but it just didn't get as many views as normally. That's fine though. We're still gonna push the positive coverage to mix in with the critical stuff. We published the EK-AIO review intentionally because I spoke with Mike on our team who runs the cooler testing, and I said, Mike, I need a good product. We need something that's good that we can talk about, because I'm looking at the pipeline and it's bad, don't buy, rip off, scam, don't buy. We need something in there that's like, hey, this thing's pretty cool. And so he said, oh, this EK-AIO I've been testing is good. And so we mixed that in. And coming up, we also have some coverage like the software stuff where we did best software for your gaming PC. That's not positive or negative because it's not a review. It's more of a guide or an informational piece. So we're mixing some of those in too. And I wanted to announce this separately. Some of you, I think a small percentage at this point, might remember we did a memory timing part 1 guide many years ago. And they had animations. We talked about primary timings, what they are and how they work. And we promised a part 2 and a part 3 many years ago. Never got to it because it was a complex subject. We had trouble getting answers on some stuff. And we basically just got in too deep. But with Patrick Stone on the team now, he has finally reworked all of this memory timings coverage. And Andrew, using all of his skills he's gained in the last few years, has been animating it to be crazy informational, really cool stuff. So that series is coming up. I have not voiced it over yet, but the script is mostly done. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up on sort of saying, hey, this is kind of my vision for what Gamers Nexus is doing right now. And if you don't care, that's fine. Skip to the next news item. But I just, it's important to me that there's a good balance of coverage so that there's some positivity there, there's some information there, and of course there's the truly unfiltered reviews. And right now the unfiltered reviews just happen to lean more critical because that's the stuff that we have here to review. But anyway, keep an eye out for more of that stuff if you're interested in guides, information / educational type stuff, and just positive coverage, because we do have it mixed in, but it might not circulate to your inbox because it doesn't have quite the view velocity as the more critical stuff. That's not going to stop us from publishing it, though. It's important to us to get that out there too. You just might have to check for it manually, like the Fantex thing. And separately, on a positive note, we were able to successfully help one of our viewers with a Dell warranty, pushing it through. So it looks like that's going to get processed by Dell when it was being refused before. We forwarded it to PR. We also helped someone with an Asus thing. You might have seen Louis Rossman do a video on this, but Asus wasn't telling a user the thermal pad thickness, and then they ended up telling them the thermal pad thickness after it got media attention. So speaking to all the positive stuff, really happy to just sort of help with the issues the community faces. And that's positive, but it's sort of born out of a negative, which is a company that has a bad warranty policy or is secretly charging someone or whatever. That's not a good thing, but we're trying to help people, get to the right people at the companies to fix their problems. Can't always do it, but it is something that we try to do. So hopefully some of the stuff lately has helped those of you with issues with products that have been critically covered like Dell's get the help you need. But anyway, that's it for the short topic. Let's move on to the actual news. NVIDIA's Founders Edition gets some special treatment. So we reported earlier this week that NVIDIA has new LHR GPUs, or light hash rate GPUs. We have a whole separate video explaining what these are, and we spoke with some of the board partners, read NVIDIA's post, of course, and got the details on the specifics of how it's being deployed, what the GPU SKUs are, and the fact that there will briefly be an overlap of the non-LHR, the originals, and LHR SKUs, so that they interlock for a little bit until probably just the LHR SKUs will continue going forward. And this applies to the 3060 Ti, the 3070, and the 3080. It does not apply to the 3090. And the 3080 Ti and 3070 Ti get a special version, as we said in the news video, where both of those will ship with only LHR, but they won't have, as far as we understand it right now, unless it changes, the mandate of having LHR in the title or on the box art, because there will not be a non-LHR version. So, I mean, unfortunately, implicitly, there is going to be LHR and non-LHR because it's true for the other SKUs. But NVIDIA's thinking is basically there's only one, and it's light hash rate, and that's what you get. You don't need to label it on the box because there's not confusion of a non-light hash rate version of the TI variants of 3080 and 3070. So anyway, that's the recap to get you up to speed. Now, the news that came out from PC Gamer in a follow-up is covering NVIDIA's FE cards specifically. NVIDIA told PC Gamer that, quote, Founders Edition is a limited production graphics card sold at MSRP. At this point, we don't have plans to make versions with LHR. To be fair, the Founders Edition cards have been lightly available as well. So there's already a light version of the FE, and it's light in supply. It's just the board partners that are affected here. Even though the FE cards haven't really seemingly been available, we certainly haven't heard many of them popping up on the NVIDIA site. Not sure if they even officially listed anymore. It does look like they're still being sold by the chosen one. Obviously, this is Best Buy. We're all doomed. But the chosen one is Best Buy, and they still occasionally stock FE cards. Those will be non-LHR. If that matters to you, cool, but it is going to mean that they're probably in a bit higher demand from the mining outfits that want non-LHR versions, and as we said in the original news video, might affect the immediate demand pressure for non-LHR cards. Next one, ATX12VO. We've done a piece on ATX12VO in the past. We published one about a year ago. It might be helpful for you to brush up on that if you don't remember it or haven't seen it. And that was after we toured some power supply factories. The reason we ran it then was because it was a big talking point, but it wasn't really production ready yet for anyone in sort of the consumer DIY space. Now, however, that's changing, and ATX12VO has found itself back in the spotlight. And this is because Intel is pursuing ATX12VO for Alder Lake adoption, and that means that the power supply makers have mostly signed on board at this point as well and are looking towards ATX12VO manufacturing. So Alder Lake will require LGA 1700 motherboards. These are new motherboards. As a brief recap of ATX12VO, this is a new Intel spec in the ATX standard. To be clear, Intel also largely developed the original ATX standard. And the ATX12VO one eschews the 24-pin motherboard connector in favor of a 10-pin connector. It does so by shedding the 5-volt and 3.3-volt rails in the power supply, and it offloads 5-volt and 3.3-volt DC to DC conversion to the motherboard. Intel states that this makes for more compact power supplies, although that comes at the cost of bigger motherboards, or at least more densely packed motherboards. DC conversion components will require extra space, will have to live on the boards, but in theory can achieve higher efficiency with idle or low load PCs. Now, originally, it seems like ATX12VO was mostly targeted towards OEMs, and that still makes the most sense. Like we talked about in our ATX12VO piece, this isn't something that has to affect all of the enthusiast class space. And at the time we talked to power supply manufacturers, they were sort of the opinion that it's not really going to change anything except for in OEM systems. And servers, by the way, largely already are 12VO, not like in the literal sense of this spec, but they only have 12 volts and ground. So this is a power supply that exists. It's just that it's a matter of to what extent it comes to consumer. So anyway, we saw ASRock's Z490 Phantom Gaming 4SR come out a while ago. Problem when it came out, even though it's 12VO, was that there wasn't really a power supply to go with it. And according to friend of the site, Der Bauer, power supply makers are coming around now. Der Bauer spoke with power supply makers such as Seasonic and Corsair and received news that they were working on consumer models adhering to the ATX12VO standard. And Seasonic specifically was already working to get their ATX12VO power supply certified by Intel. Der Bauer also spoke to a couple of motherboard makers, such as MSI, but wasn't able to get definitive information. Furthermore, Intel is also unsurprisingly pushing for wider adoption with Alder Lake. Alder Lake S CPUs will use a hybrid core composition featuring high-power Golden Cove cores and low-power Gracemont cores. And Intel already claims Alder Lake will offer the best performance per watt for a desktop-class CPU. Further, according to a document obtained by Video Cards, Intel notes that in order to get ATX12VO certified ADL-S systems to the market in time, OEMs need to be working with power supply and motherboard vendors by the end of May 2021, and Alder Lake S is slated to hit the market either in late 21 or early 22. Intel noted that power supply makers need 4 to 5 months to get ready for mass production, and motherboard vendors need 4 to 5 months to validate boards. And if your question at the end of all of this is, but why? Then our ATX12VO piece from last year is still accurate today. The information hasn't really changed. The timelines have shifted, but if you want to understand it, hopefully that piece helps you out. Now for some of the Intel DG2 rumors. So Igor of Igor's Lab recently reported on Intel Xe-HPG DG2 GPU rumors. And these DG2 class rumors relate to an uncovered slide indicating a potential for 5 different SKUs of the Intel DG2. This is firmly in the rumor status territory right now, but we wanted to bring it up anyway. Igor's table points to SKUs by the name of DG2, SKU 1 through SKU 5. Either of these names will be more refined later, or Intel has taken a very literal approach to fixing its chaotic naming scheme on CPUs. We look forward to a future with an Intel i7 SKU 1 and i5 SKU 2. Regardless, the table lists the packages as ranging from 96 EUs up to 512. Like AMD and NVIDIA, Intel has its own language for cores and core containers. Theirs is execution unit. This can be thought of in a sense as similar to the SM or the CU from NVIDIA or AMD respectively. Package sizes are rumored at 29 by 29 millimeters, up to 43 by roughly 38 millimeters. Additionally, out recently, a leak from Video Cards points toward a GDDR6 inclusion on the DG2, with 384 EUs on that one, aligning with what Igor is reporting in his own table. Rumored memory capacities range from 4 to 16 gigabytes. The power limits and fuller specs of these GPUs are yet to be determined at this point and are unfinalized. And you can check Igor's Lab for the full report on this particular rumor. For Intel at this point should start showing some motivation to get towards a launch for fourth quarter of 21 for maybe one of these, up through second quarter of 22 for the full DG2 lineup. Up next, as we mentioned briefly last week, AMD has made public its newly amended wafer supply agreement with GlobalFoundries, which outlines the relationship that the two companies will have over the next few years. Most notably, the newly amended WSA drops any and all exclusivity deals that AMD and GlobalFoundries previously held. The new amendment reads, quote, "The A&R 7th Amendment also removes all prior exclusivity commitments and provides the company with full flexibility to contract with any other wafer foundry with respect to all products manufactured at any technology node." AMD had already previously negotiated its WSA with GlobalFoundries to allow it to source 7nm and below chips on TSMC for the cutting-edge nodes. This was largely a result of GlobalFoundries pulling out of the cutting-edge node race and opting to focus on mature processes. The new amendment kicks that up a notch further, allowing AMD to source wafers from any manufacturer, regardless of technology. In the years prior, AMD was using GlobalFoundries for 12nm and up. Although GlobalFoundries isn't the primary supplier at this point, AMD is still looking at a purchase order to the tune of $1.6 billion over the next 3 years or so, up through 2024. And the agreement calls for GlobalFoundries to retain a certain amount of fab space available for AMD. AMD will have to pay for the availability of this fab space, whether or not it's using it. This is somewhat standard as well. And the new amendment will carry through December of 2024. Now, as for GlobalFoundries and what it's doing for AMD right now, it's still producing I/O dies for AMD, specifically for the EPYC CPUs and for Ryzen CPUs. APUs not included here, and it handles AMD's trailing edge products. Industry seers Digitimes have been reporting over the past week that there's been a reduction in motherboard sales of 10 to 15% thanks to retail bundles. This, if you think through it, isn't too unsurprising because what's happening is as motherboards get dumped on consumers who are trying to buy video cards, there is a possibility those consumers end up with extra motherboards or motherboards they never wanted. And the end result is that there's in excess of secondhand motherboards, power supplies, and other oddities that get bundled in with a highly desirable GPU that hit the secondhand market and thus reduce the demand for a brand new one from the retailers. Digitimes suggested that motherboard sales are set to see a 10 to 15% decrease throughout second quarter of 21, and they think that trend will continue through the rest of 2021. Among other things, bundling is the key contributor. Newegg, for example, has been especially guilty of bundling things in with video cards. This is sometimes presented as an anti-scalper tactic, as if that would do anything, because as we all know, scalpers can only buy one thing at a time. But in reality, what's happening is it's a great way to move inventory that's stagnant or sitting around. You will sometimes hear this referred to as attachment, depending on whether you're talking about retail or an SI or something. But you walk into a micro center, and what they're trying to do is attach another product to the sale of the discounted CPU that you might not be able to get online. And this is no different from that. It's no different from what happens normally. It's just that right now, with the shortages in the industry, it's become a lot more of a pain point as people get stuck with explosive power supplies. Microsoft is officially killing off Internet Explorer in 2022 on the list of things that Microsoft should have killed 10 years ago, or on the list of things where you go, that's still alive. Internet Explorer is number one, and IE11 will officially be retired and no longer supported. This move has been a long time coming, and Microsoft has been spinning down IE over the last several years now. One of the biggest reasons IE11 is still around is just legacy support, because many websites, applications, and intranets are still based on Internet Explorer and older Microsoft web technologies like ActiveX. In fact, according to a survey that Microsoft ran, enterprises have an average of 1,678 legacy applications requiring IE compatibility, and Microsoft introduced Internet Explorer mode for Edge as a result. Microsoft's newer Chromium-based browser Edge allows for legacy functionality in a compatibility mode, but IE has carried on for at least a little while. As far as Microsoft is concerned, the path forward is Edge at this point. The writing's been on the wall for IE for some time, as Microsoft has pushed Edge right in front of people as the OS gets updated, and Microsoft has already ended support for IE in the Microsoft Teams web app, and it's also ending it in Office 365 services. While Microsoft is announcing the retirement of IE, there are a few areas out of scope for this announcement. Notably, the entire Windows 10 long-term servicing channel branch is unaffected, as is the MSH TML or Trident engine, including WebOC. not overclocking. Microsoft intends to support IE mode in Edge through at least 2029, and it will support IE 11 in its long-term servicing branch through 2029 as well. We assume at that point, Microsoft will then extend life support for Internet Explorer so that the DMV has enough time to move off of it and onto a newer browser. AMD's Ryzen 5000 B2 revision is not a Ryzen 5000 refresh. This was in the realm of rumors in the past week and has been debunked at this point. There is speculation of a B2 stepping of Ryzen 5000 CPUs marking an identifier for a refresh, which would potentially take place, if it came true, in the form of an XT lineup for Ryzen 5000. That's not the case at this point, and AMD has confirmed this with multiple outlets. Current in-market Ryzen 5000 CPUs carry a B0 stepping, or revision, in AMD's terminology, and this is something you can see in CPU-Z, for instance. AMD is planning to transition the family over to the newer B2 version. The B2 version, or revision, remains a bit of a mystery on specifics, but AMD confirmed that there's no enhanced performance or functionality tied to the revision. AMD told Polish benchmarking site benchmark.pl the following, translated via Google. Quote, as part of our continued effort to expand our manufacturing and logistics capabilities, AMD will gradually roll over AMD Ryzen 5000 series desktop processors to B2 revision over the next 6 months. It does not bring functionality or performance improvements, and no BIOS update is required. TSMC and some research in the news next. So this is an industry topic about silicon advancement and technology. There's a new breakthrough research report that's been posted and was spotted by Verdict. It is a research paper published by Nature and behind a paywall, so we have limited information, but it outlines some new ground being broken in terms of semiconductor manufacturing and potential for future materials. The research includes scientists and engineers from MIT, from TSMC, from Berkeley, and from the National University of Taiwan. The abstract outlines the use of semi-metal bismuth as contact electrodes rather than silicon to greatly reduce the contact resistance and improve current delivery in two-dimensional transistors. The research is being heralded as a way towards 1nm class chips and follows shortly after IBM announced its own breakthrough with 2nm semiconductors. Up next, the FTC sues Frontier Communications over, is it really a question at this point? Over line. So the Frontier Communications Group has advertised and charged customers according to the FTC for broadband speeds that it cannot deliver, and as such, it is in violation of several sections of the FTC Act and several local state laws. Now, Frontier Communications is on the business end of the lawsuit after its customers have been on the business end of its internet. And joining the FTC in the lawsuit are 6 states. Those states are Arizona, California, Indiana, Michigan, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. The FTC complaint alleges that Frontier grossly misrepresented the speed tiers of its DSL service to 1.3 million customers spanning 25 states. It also failed to clearly communicate the limitations of DSL. What? No, ISPs don't do that. ISPs often obscure broadband speed with phrases such as up to or as fast as. They also use words like megs, which drives me personally crazy and I wish they would stop. Furthermore, the FTC alleges that Frontier has billed its customers for DSL speeds that it wasn't able to deliver and that customers weren't actually getting. Like most ISPs, Frontier enjoys a regional monopoly on its services. Except this version of monopoly is the McDonald's one, where Frontier gets to rig the game and pick the pieces that it wants. Frontier is now facing, well, additional entanglement and litigation over its practices, and like most ISPs, it emerges relatively unscathed every time so far. We'll see if this one's different. Frontier most recently settled a lawsuit with the state of Washington over much the same issue, which was misrepresented speeds and hidden fees. The problem, as ever, is that the FTC has limited authority when it comes to ISPs. In order for the FTC to intervene, an ISP has to be in clear violation of specifically the FTC Act. There are many more things I'd like to say about ISPs. We're going to leave it there for now. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. As always, you can go to store.gamersaccess.net to help us out directly and get something cool in return. We have new mouse pads on the store in the form of the blue and black component and our first ever red and black product, which is the Charge mouse pad available. Of course, you can back order the mouse mats, mod mats, and other products. Go to the show notes in the description below if you'd like to read more about any of these stories, and you can subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.